Hello and welcome to PT and Nutrition Education's e-learning platform. Today we're going to start the planning for the 2-week diet plan, which will be handed in as supplementary evidence alongside your learner achievement portfolio. So today's slides are going to be all about how we prepare for the 2-week diet plan, what needs to be included exactly, and what kind of details you need to be ensuring in order to satisfy the criteria and to pass your level 3 nutrition for physical activity. Okay, so as we mentioned in the previous slide, your learner achievement portfolio will incorporate your client analysis, it'll incorporate your client review and also your program overview, but the 2-week diet plan will be supplementary evidence which you'll be expected to submit also alongside supplementary evidence for your 2-week physical activity program. So in terms of how we submit this, there is a few options which you can choose from. You can see from the bottom, the evidence could be a Microsoft Word document, it could be a PowerPoint, it could be Excel or even Publisher. Completely up to you how you submit that, in which format, but there has to be an inclusion of the 4 bullet points that you can see in front of you. So the first bullet point there, we have to ensure that all of the food, meal by meal, over Monday through Sunday, twice over, has to be included within your 2-week diet plan. There needs to be meal timings, and those meal timings are very important because there has to be direct compatibility to the physical activity program. So we can't, for example, have a meal planned right in the middle of a training session. That just shows that you haven't thought about it. And of course, for your program overview, you will have to justify some of the reasons that you've chosen certain foods, certain timings, certain portions, certain macronutrient prescriptions. So this is a perfect opportunity in your PPO to set yourself up for some decent justifications. The third bullet point here, it says that there is in-depth calorie amounts and macronutrient breakdowns for each meal. So every meal we need to know how many calories are in that meal, how many grams of carbohydrate, proteins or fats within that meal, so that at the end of the day or at the end of the week there is a breakdown of exactly how many calories have been consumed, how much of one particular macronutrient, whether that be carbs, proteins or fats. All 3 of them really need to be broken down at the end of the week, because of course from that we can relate that to evidence-based research once again to justify the choices that you're making for your client and the goals which they're after achieving. The 4th bullet point, we're looking at information regarding the weight of food as well. So if you're putting in for example, a food, let's just say pasta, we need to say about how much in grams, okay? That again is going to give us an indication whether the calories that you've highlighted for that particular meal are correct. And again, it allows the client, if they are following a step-by-step 2-week diet plan, they know exactly how much food they're cooking in order to achieve the goals which have been set out. So your 2-week diet plan must be detailed, and it must include those 4 bullet points if it's going to meet the criteria and satisfy the assessor and the external verifier. Okay, so when it comes to actually planning a nutrition plan and ensuring that your client has full understanding of what they'll be following, it's really, really important that we incorporate what I like to call the 3 T's. So this is timing, this is type, and this is total. Just for complete understanding with your client, ensuring that they know the timings in which they're consuming food, and there is a plethora of research relating to timings and what might be most beneficial depending on the goal that you're trying to achieve. So therefore, it is very important that your client is aware of the time that their meals are going to take place. So if it is Monday at 9 a.m. and then you have the meal there which they're going to be undertaking, very important as well to allow you to justify those reasons in relation to peer-reviewed research. When it comes to type, here we can't just say, for example, pasta. We need to be more specific with the food example that we're giving. So your client, there is no misconceptions. If we do say pasta, are we talking about unrefined pasta, where it's maybe fibrous and therefore has a completely different effect on your blood sugar? a very different glycemic index, or is it, for example, refined pasta or white pasta, which again is going to have a very different impact on your glycemic response, and therefore could completely mess up the goal that you're trying to achieve because you've not been specific about the type of food. So again, very important that we include that within our nutrition plan. And then, of course, the total, by how much are they actually going to consume. And again, for most people, they're going to be understanding this through grams. Just to be completely thorough, if you just say a handful, of course, this is going to be very different for different people, because of course everyone's hand is a different size, and therefore saying one handful of this or one handful of that could completely mean totally different things, and therefore totally different calorie uptake based on the information that you've given them. So always try to ensure that we're talking about grams so that they can objectively measure that and ensure that the goals are being achieved, and there is complete understanding when it comes to the nutrition plan. Okay, so if we delve deeper now into what a 2-week diet plan should look like, hopefully this slide will give you an idea of how you could design your 2-week program as your supplementary evidence for your client for your level 3 nutrition for physical activity. You can see here that the consistent themes such as the weight of the food, the timing of the food, the total calorie input per day and also per week, even grams per kilo, all of this information is available to the reader. Now, this is actually an extract from a mixed martial artist who fights in the UFC, and with any UFC athlete, one of the main aims of employing a nutritionist is that they have to make weight. All combat athletes will have to make weight prior to actually fighting. So that was the overall aim of the program, to allow him to go from 77 kilos. You can see there that we're 10 weeks out at this moment in time, and we had to get him down to 66 kilos over the course of 10 weeks. So in 10 weeks, what we tried to do is we tried to aim at losing around 1 kilo per week, which again falls in the safe guidelines for weight loss, and also to the point where we can lose that 1 kilo per week, and we can try to target primarily fat mass, because of course what we want to try to do is to try and keep hold as much muscle mass as we possibly can, to ensure that he's got the ability to express force, to increase his strength, and so on. So if we look specifically at some of these meals, we can see, and hopefully I can give you some examples as to some of the justifications that you can give. Now, whilst it's important that you design your 2-week diet plan and you incorporate all of your meals, all of your timings, all of your foods, it's also important to bear in mind that you're going to have to provide a rationale, justification relating to peer-reviewed research as to why you've made some of the decisions that you've made. So if I just give you some examples, then hopefully this can serve as a nice starting point for you, not only to design your plan, but also to completely justify and satisfy your assessor. So, for example, if we choose Monday as a starting point, and we look at the foods that are available there for the athlete in which he's been asked to follow, let's give some justification related to some peer-reviewed research as to why that particular day was designed in such a way. So what I'd like you to pay attention to is that over the course of the day, in total, he's consuming 5 meals. If we don't count the 5 p.m. coconut water as a meal, that is. So with that in mind, and like we just mentioned earlier, one of the most important factors is during the weight making process is that the athlete actually maintains as much muscle mass as we possibly can. So there is a plethora of research relating to protein consumption and how to optimize muscle protein synthesis. And you can see that throughout the day, throughout those 5 meals, every single meal is centered around a good quality protein source. So in the morning, there is 1 scoop of whey protein. There is a great article by Tang and colleagues in 2009 talking about how whey is superior to illicit muscle protein synthesis. We've also got some whey protein after his morning training session. Again, there is a lot of research relating to why a whey protein consumption is actually superior in terms of its absorption into the bloodstream and therefore subsequently to the muscle, so that muscle protein synthesis can take place. In addition, the 2 p.m. meal, again, we've got some good quality protein there in that he's consuming 175 grams of salmon. So not only have we got a good quality protein source, a complete protein source, we've also got some fatty acids there in the meal, some omega-3, which serves as very good for a number of reasons. And then at the 6 p.m. meal, this is after his evening training session, we've got 150 grams of chicken breast. We've even mentioned about how to cook that. And then before bed, there is 25 grams of casein. So casein has been identified as a protein source which will essentially drip feed the muscles at a much slower rate because its absorption into the bloodstream is much slower than whey. So this is perfect for a nighttime feed, given that drip feeding of protein to the working muscle can take place over an extended period, so that all the way through the evening, muscle protein synthetic rates are increased. Now, just then, I've mentioned maybe 3 or even 4 aspects of literature which have been applied with those protein sources. In addition to that, as I first mentioned, this is 5 meals which are pretty much separated by around 2, 3, or 4 hour intervals. Now, the reason why it's been designed in such a way is that there was a study in the Journal of Physiology by Areta in 2013 who wanted to test how we can optimize muscle protein synthetic rates over the course of a 24-hour period. Now, given that for 8 hours we are asleep and we're only awake for 16 hours on average per day, the meals have been designed in such a way that every 3 to 4 hours, a good quality, complete protein source is being consumed by the athlete. Now, Areta and colleagues found out that feeding in such a way every 3 to 4 hours is superior when it comes to increasing the muscle protein synthetic response. They tested 3 different ways of feeding protein. They tried a pulsing manner, where we're consuming protein up to 7-8 times a day every couple of hours. They tried a bolus dose, where it was just 2 big doses of protein per day. But then they also tried to spread that out, the protein intake, over the course of 3 to 4 hours. And what was found in the results is that muscle protein synthetic responses were much greater in the group which fed protein every 3 to 4 hours. And the reason for that, if you can see from this graph here, is that muscle protein synthesis will peak and then fall at those 3 to 4 hour periods. So if we can time a protein meal every 3 to 4 hours, just as we're on that downward spiral towards muscle protein breakdown, we can increase to muscle protein building, and that muscle protein synthetic response can be restored, and therefore we are maintaining or even building more muscle with that particular approach. So that summarizes one of the rationales behind why we designed the program in such a way. If we look for another justification, we can see here that on Wednesday morning at between 7 and 8 a.m., I did allow flexible timings for this particular athlete, depending on his sleep and wake cycles. We see here that we've got 150 grams of ribeye, we've got some spinach, and then also some slices of chorizo, simply because the athlete did enjoy chorizo and did request that he had that. So it's also important as well to consider the likes and dislikes of your athlete, of course. So that was considered, and as well, putting that particular food in didn't mess around with what we were trying to achieve with this particular meal. Now, what were we trying to achieve? You can see there that there is a grappling session. Now, the grappling session took place around 10 a.m., 10:30 a.m. Again, that was interchangeable on certain days. Now, the grapple session on a Wednesday was a particularly light session. This was all about technical and tactical work. So I knew that the athlete wasn't going to be working at a high VO2 max during that session, and therefore we could consider that a low intensity session. Now, the reason why we've taken him into that session without any carbohydrate, you can see that it's a very fat and very protein rich meal with very little carbohydrate, is due to a reason related to research called the train low or nutritional periodization overview. So with this particular area of research, training in low carbohydrate states was tested for the impact that that could have not only on fat loss and being able to help facilitate a weight making process, but also on training adaptation. So there's some fantastic work at Liverpool John Moores University um, by Morton and Close, and they looked particularly at training in low carbohydrate states and the adaptations that that would bring about. And the findings were really interesting. They found that through training low during such low intensity sessions, what we can do is train the body to use alternative fuels, and with that we can actually increase lipolysis, which is the breakdown of fats. We can also increase fatty acid oxidation. So once those fats have been broken down, they can then be carried to the mitochondria and fat can be burned for fuel. But also, it's very interestingly set off a gene response which actually encoded for what's known as mitochondrial biogenesis. So this is where more mitochondria have actually been made within the muscle cell. And if you know about mitochondria from your level 3 personal training qualification, you'll know that this is the powerhouse of the cell where all aerobic respiration takes place. Now, if we're improving the amount or increasing the amount of mitochondria within a muscle cell, what we're doing is increasing aerobic capacity. And if we increase aerobic capacity, of course, what we're doing there is being able to train that athlete to use oxygen much better and therefore essentially become fitter. So in that train low state, okay, he might, struggle during a particular session, and that's why we choose low intensity sessions so that we can train that body to increase fat utilization and also potentially increase that muscle's capacity to use oxygen as a fuel and therefore become aerobically fitter. So once again, that's related to some research. It's a justification behind that particular meal, and something of that standard would be perfect when it comes to the justification in your predictive program overview, which you need to write again as supplementary evidence for your learner achievement portfolio. So that's just two examples of the rationale and justifications that you can give. Of course, it is expected that you are going to talk about a few more when it comes to your PPO. So let's divulge into some of the other things that you can see and is expected in your 2-week diet plan. So you can see that we've got timings for every single meal. You can see that we've got the weights of the food. You can see that we've got the actual types of food. We've mentioned there whole wheat pasta. We've even mentioned some cooking processes. So we've said that the chicken must be grilled. Again, these kind of instructions can make a huge difference to the calories that you're going to be consuming. Again, there is reference to things here like pre-bed. Again, it's interchangeable things that you might have discussed with your client, which doesn't necessarily need to be pinpointed, but as long as you've had that discussion and you can maybe allude to that in your writing, then that's fantastic. And then, of course, we've got the overviews of each day. So you can see how many calories that have been consumed, the macronutrient breakdown in grams, and then as well, based on the current weight of the athlete, we've also got an overview of how much grams per kilo that athlete is consuming for protein, carbohydrate, and fat over the course of the week. Okay. You'll also notice that every day we've got here a different calorie amount or consumption. They are quite similar overall, But again, it is important to know that if you have a particular calorie amount that you're trying to aim for, we don't have to hit that nail on the head every single time. There might be days where you overconsume calories. There might be days where you underconsume calories. Overall, what matters is, of course, what's going to be the overall calorie intake for that particular week. Okay? There might be reasons and justifications related to research that you can give for high calorie days and low calorie days. It all depends on what your athlete is trying to achieve. So again, there's going to be many permutations depending on your client and what you're trying to achieve personally. So hopefully this slide gives you an insight into some of the thinking that goes behind a diet plan, and also how we can design it in such a way that is going to satisfy the assessor and also satisfy the external verifier. Okay, and lastly, in supplement to your 2-week diet plan, you also must provide a 2-week training plan which is consistent with the meals, the timings that you've shown for your 2-week diet plan. This shows that you have compatibility when it comes to your physical activity, whether it be for a professional athlete or a recreational athlete. You have to include some type of description of training over the course of those 2 weeks which you're going to share with your assessor. So you can see this is just an example of what you can include. We don't expect session plans, so we don't expect to see reps and sets and rep max percentages. All of that kind of thing has already been taken care of, and you've practiced that in your level 3 personal training. So this is just an example of what we might expect to see. There is a very brief description of the training activity that's taking place, when it's taking place, which day, and also which time. You can see the method of training, whether it be Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or whether it be strength and conditioning. Again, just an overview which links directly to your 2-week diet plan. So again, that you can justify in your PPO exactly why you've chosen the foods you have relating to the sessions which are going to take place. Once those two things are done, then your 2-week diet plan is complete, and then you can start to justify your choices with your client in your PPO. Good luck.